Do I think she made some mistakes along the way? I do. She made quite a few mistakes along the way.
Rachel Zegler is getting a lot of hate.
And I feel like, especially with people like this that have like these types of viewpoints, I don't see her coming back from this at all. I think she is totally cooked with this.
And when she landed a big role like this and realized that this is not the character that she really wants to portray, she should have given that role to someone who really understands that character and loves that character.
She stepped onto the Los Angeles Fan Expo stage, expecting cheers, but what greeted Rachel Zegler was a single jagged boo that sliced through the air like feedback from a broken speaker. The jeering multiplied, first a ripple, then a wave, until it felt as though the entire hall had congealed into one roaring no.
Honestly, girl boss narratives suck. They are either overpowered, poorly written, forced down the audience's throat, and it just looks like I'm staring at TikTok modern women posts that always talk about men are trash, men are this, men are that. They finally got the opportunity to do that, especially with this buffoon right here. I still don't know why she's still alive. And before you start saying I'm sexist, here are some well-written female characters. This woman right here is way better. So is she. And her too. Man, I love this girl, honestly. She couldn't fit in the background, but Debbie is definitely number one.
Phones rose, flashes strobed, and within seconds, a live stream stuffed the humiliation onto every social feed on Earth. The woman Disney once unveiled as its next fairytale queen just stood there, mascara pooling, smile collapsing, hands trembling at her sides. By dawn, clips of the breakdown were disappearing under copyright strikes almost as fast as they went viral, and comment threads burned with one question: how did Hollywood's fastest rising ingenue hit the wall so spectacularly?
I never want it to come off as me being ungrateful for the opportunities I have when I say that this has been the biggest adjustment of my life, like understanding the way my life operates now, being who I am, and the things that I've been so fortunate to make. It comes with so much ground. So much ground that I never thought I would be able to cover, and that people think I'm doing poorly, and other people think I'm doing gracefully, and I don't think I'm doing it at all.
3 years earlier, her story had been the stuff of streaming age legend. A 17-year-old from suburban New Jersey uploads a shaky audition clip to Twitter, and Steven Spielberg plucks her from obscurity to headline West Side Story. Award season anoints her with a Golden Globe. Disney swoops in to cast her as Snow White before the red carpet confetti even settles.
Disney, get your girl. Rachel Zegler is making it very difficult to be excited for the new Snow White movie that's supposed to come out next year. If you are living under a rock, there's been a lot of controversy about the fact that Rachel Zegler is playing Snow White in the film. That's not where my problem comes. I'm all for it. Go for it. But what she's doing in press, and these are interviews that I believe were done before the actors' strike, but of course are now being brought up on the internet. She's basically talking about how much she didn't like the actual original movie, even saying that it scared her, and then talking about how the love story in this isn't really going to be at the forefront, that the prince, yes, has been cast, he's in it, but might be cut, Hollywood, and that the prince in the original film was problematic and was creepy because he was stalking Snow White. I just can't believe that Disney's PR hasn't silenced her on this yet. The live action movies already have a problem where people are kind of over them and they don't like the changes that are being made from the originals to these. And with this one, we're definitely going to see some change.
Andrew Lloyd Webber fast tracks an Evita revival around her voice, and Trade Magazine's headline, "The Future Arrives." Few rookies ever start higher, fewer still fall faster. The first crack seemed harmless, just a little too much candor during press. Interviewers asked what drew her to Snow White, and she quipped that the 1937 original was creepy, that the prince was basically a stalker, and that love stories where women dream of marriage felt weird to Gen Z. Some praised the honesty. Traditional Disney fans recoiled. Meme makers spliced her quotes over melting dwarfs. Comment threads became knife fights. Yet Zegler, believing authenticity meant always speaking her mind, doubled down instead of dialing back. To executives in Burbank, the worry wasn't her politics. It was the perception she was ridiculing the very audience Disney relies on to bring toddlers, parents, and grandparents back to theaters year after year.
Rachel Zegler is back in the news because her PR team is working overtime right now to fix her image because so many of these resurfaced video clips of her just make her look really, really bad. What matters here is perception. Who she actually is actually bears little has little consequence on any of this. How she's perceived by the world. That's what matters.
Right.
And how she's
There's varying
perceived by the
degrees.
world is not good because she hasn't been able to escape these interview clips, which show a clear disdain for the company she works for, a clear disdain for the story in which she's been hired to help portray and tell. Who she is really has little bearing on any of this. At the end of the day, Disney doesn't care who she really is. I'm sure the people that love her, her friends and family, she's plenty nice to them. That's not what matters here.
Then came March 2025, when Snow White finally opened. Boycotts trended for weeks. Conservative pundits framed her as the poster child for woke Hollywood, and box office analysts watched in disbelief as a movie that cost north of £200 million limped to $145 million worldwide. In the back rooms where accountants decide futures, whispers turned into verdicts. Zegler's outspoken persona had scorched the family-friendly brand. She was no longer the next Emma Watson. She was a cautionary YouTube thumbnail titled "Go Woke, Go Broke." While the film hemorrhaged money, rehearsals for Evita across the Atlantic spiraled into chaos. Leaked footage showed Zegler mid-tirade over lyric changes, storming off stage as crew members stared at the floor. Another grainy clip appeared on gossip sites, security escorting her through a Palladium hallway after what insiders spun as a creative disagreement. Ticket pre-sales stalled. Weber's office released a chilly statement about scheduling conflicts. Whatever the truth, the narrative calcified. Backstage, she was impossible. On stage, she was volatile. Momentum she'd banked during her Cinderella ascent evaporated almost overnight. That set the stage, literally, for Fan Expo, the ill-fated comeback gambit. Crisis managers pre-screened questions, stacked sympathetic moderators, even arranged polite applause cues.
Yeah, well, we're busy, of course. Evita opens at the Palladium this summer, so we're collaborating with Jamie Lloyd again following Sunset Boulevard. Well, Rachel was desperate to play Eva Perron. You know, it was her idea, and we saw an audition tape, and she was absolutely sensational. You know, she worked with our musical supervisor in New York on the material. Her versions of the songs were terrific. Jamie's excited, Andrew and Tim are excited. So, I mean, it should make for a fabulous summer at the Palladium. Ticket sales are already, through the roof. So we're really thrilled about that.
Yet when Zegler materialized, silence replaced the scripted claps. Then someone shouted, "Not my Snow White," and the room detoured into mob psychology. She tried to beam Hollywood charm, but her pupils flicked left and right like trapped birds, and the boos only grew. When her voice cracked and she stepped back from the mic, it wasn't just a human breaking, it was an algorithm's bright red indicator flipping from next big thing to damaged goods. The internet erupted in two camps. One cheered the downfall. Threads crowed that arrogance had met karma, that Disney's corporate revisionism finally faced consumer revolt.
A lot of what you see with Zegler is really just a pretty common Gen Z mentality and approach to work. She believes that she should be able to express herself and speak her truth or whatever nonsense, regardless of the consequences to everybody else. In reality, you have a job. You're getting paid to do this job. You signed on the dotted line. You took on the role. And that job comes with certain basic responsibilities. And one of the most basic is the responsibility to control yourself and comport yourself a certain way publicly so that you don't harm the project, thereby harm all the hundreds of other people who are working on it.
Members edited her tear-streaked face over classic villain scenes. #boycott Snow White morphed into #cry more Rachel. The other camp recoiled, arguing that delighting in a young woman's public collapse was proof society had turned bullying into a spectator sport. Mental health advocates spoke of trauma and the viral cruelty economy. Even some former critics asked where basic empathy had gone. In the middle of that digital crossfire stood Zegler, mute, her Twitter dormant for the first time in years. Silence, however, can be strategy. Hollywood crisis playbooks agree on one principle. The internet forgets only if you starve it. For weeks, Zegler vanished. No paparazzi shots, no podcast cameos, no sponsored content. Her agents fielded concern from insurers who now slapped surcharges on productions she sniffed at. Studio execs floated theories. A low-budget indie might reset the image. A streaming surprise drop could let audiences judge performance over persona. A raw, unscripted podcast confession might humanize her. Yet every option carried risk. Book her too soon and backlash reignites. Wait too long and the spotlight moves on without her. Because in truth, the backlash wasn't a single explosion, it was erosion. Fans felt talked down to, not talked with. They didn't mind modern spins on fairy tales. They minded being told the stories that shaped their childhoods were foolish.
Girl power, girl boss. Everyone needs to be a strong, independent woman that don't need no man. And everybody is tired of that. Everybody is sick of that. And everybody is ganging up on Rachel. She dealt with some really, really severe backlash, which I can kind of understand, but me personally, I'm not under the impression that she wasn't maybe coached to make this happen, to create some type of a draw for the movie, because this is the narrative that Disney particularly is trying to push.
When audiences suspect a star disdains them, trust dies, and box office grosses follow. That's the crater Zegler now faced, a trust deficit deeper than any plot hole critics mocked. The paradox is that controversy also creates curiosity. Streams of the 1937 Snow White surged the week her booing video trended. Think pieces dissected every line she'd ever uttered. Even her harshest detractors kept clicking, which means brand value, though negative, remained potent. And in Hollywood's ledger, attention equals currency. Studios forgive almost anything if they smell a profitable redemption arc. Robert Downey Jr. clawed back from arrests to anchor the MCU. Kristen Stewart outran the Twilight memes to earn auteur cred. The common denominator wasn't spin, but humility. Roles that subverted public caricature. Interviews that felt unscripted enough to bleed. Does Rachel Zegler possess that gear? The answer will dictate whether her name becomes a Jeopardy footnote or a comeback headline. If she reemerges with more lectures about outdated fairy tales, the internet will shrug and move on to the next uproar. But imagine she reappears in a stripped-down A24 drama.
And to everyone who hates when I win, the winged victory came to the Louvre in pieces, and people still lined up to see her. And I can only hope that despite my flaws, and despite my cracks and my breaks, and there are many of them, that at every premiere and everything I do, people will wait in line to see.
Voice barely above a whisper, playing, not mocking, a character yearning for connection. Imagine she sits across from a long-form interviewer and, without handlers, admits the pressure, the missteps, the disconnect she never saw coming. Vulnerability, when genuine, short-circuits cynicism, and the web, ever hungry for new narratives, might just tilt from mocking to rooting if the sequel feels unscripted. For now, Hollywood's casting boards list her name in pencil, not ink. Disney has shifted live-action priorities. Broadway producers weigh whether insurance can cover another viral meltdown. But every tabloid headline, every snarky tweet, every think piece you're reading keeps her in circulation. And circulation is the embryo of relevance. The story isn't over because enough people still want to know how it ends. Maybe she vanishes, builds an off-camera life, and lets the spotlight fade. Maybe she stages the raw apology and nails a Sundance darling. Maybe a streaming giant bets that the same algorithm that fed on her downfall can flip to champion her rebirth. The only certainty is the industry will watch whichever move she makes first, crunch the engagement metrics, and decide whether to open its gates again. And so the curtain sits half-drawn, a princess outcast, a fandom divided, a business calculating, and a young actor weighing whether her next lines should be scripted or simply spoken from a place no publicist can polish. Hollywood loves redemption as much as it loves downfall. It just prefers its stars earn the former by living through the latter. If Rachel Zegler can deliver the one thing audiences feel she withheld, unfiltered respect for the people who kept her in marquee lights, then the boos that gutted her in Los Angeles may one day echo as the overture to an unlikely Act 2. If she can't, the spotlight will swivel to the next controversy, and Zegler's meteoric saga will freeze in the archives as a perfectly modern fable about how fast the internet crowns new royalty and how much faster it demands a head for every perceived slight.